Anyway, drug policy and ethics. What I'm going to be talking about is going to make you think that we should be not even talking about drug policy. We need to think about a people policy. Now, when we say war on drugs, I'm going to use this because I also don't want you to use the expression war on drugs anymore. Darryl Bickler, I'm a solicitor, so if anybody's had any accidents, trips or falls anywhere, next time be a lot more careful, okay? I've virtually given up working as a solicitor. Such is my frustration with the justice in this country. At no stage will the judiciary hold the government to account for their misadministration of the law. And at no stage will they recognise your human rights to be who you are. And it's an outrage. The separation of powers in this country has gone as far as drugs are concerned, of drug users are concerned. Sorry, I should say drug users. And that is everybody's interest, even those people that have never consumed a drug in their life. Not that there's anybody here who's never had a drug in their life. Of course, even alcohol and tobacco are drugs. All pharmaceuticals, things from the doctor, they're all drugs, over the counter, drugs. So I don't even know why we talk about a war on drugs. It's a complete illusion. What I've been doing for a few years is fighting, if I were to be big myself up, fighting for those rights through the courts for various defendants. And I've had a very checkered journey, I can tell you. I'm currently effectively banned from working in courts, as the High Court, two very senior judges have told me that if I ever dare turn up in the court again and say that there's been some problem with the administration of the Misuse of Drugs Act, or that somehow the rights of the defendant are not being respected, then I will be personally held responsible for the full cost of the High Court hearing. And believe me, that can be a lot of money that I don't have. So let's, why is it personal? Well, you know, if a drug experience is an ineffable experience, it just has to be personal. It just has to be personal, because what this is about, it's about the individual's point of contact with their own consciousness. What could be more personal than that? So, next. Oh, wait a minute. Doesn't appear to be...
Click anywhere on the screen, I think. Anywhere on the screen at once.
It should do, but it's not. Right, oh, a little bit of entertainment for you. Let's see if how flexible your minds are, and if you can actually see things differently. So there's a little prize today for the first person that can actually say what it's going to say next on the screen. And it's an official Smoke and Mirrors gift. So this is the mirror. It's a piece of drug paraphernalia, and here is the smoking part. So the first person can win that, who gets it. So I don't have to do that each time. Here we go. Excellent. Well, I didn't see who said that, but oh, it's you.
Got a dyslexic in the house.
Could be to your advantage, believe me, my experience. So, the reason why I put that there might be, I'll just put this here. Do you know who said that? Or where that comes from, that quote?
Every politician.
Yeah.
Well, it was the Home Office who said that. And it's that word reflected. Reflect upon it for a moment. Reflected in the act. They mean that the act says that it's a act of prohibition. That's what they mean, isn't it? But there's another meaning, is that they've actually mirrored the act. You are living in a reverse paradigm of reality under the current law. The current law doesn't work in the way that they tell you. So it sort of works that way because the courts will apply it to you. They will apply a misadministered law. But the law works around a human being. It's what you do that counts. You have agency. Objects don't have agency. And this Act of Parliament is something which is about controlling people sensibly, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with the Misuse of Drugs Act, in my view, and I'll explain why. So, you don't need to write all this down, by the way. I've got loads of handouts of all the slides, so if you want one, come back to me later, okay? Got everybody here? Yeah. Great. So, I don't know if you know any of these facts, but when I tell people that actually drugs are not illegal, it's actually you who's been declared to be acting illegally. They say, oh yes, it's the use of drugs which is illegal, isn't it? Well, actually the law does not say that the use of drugs is illegal. Yes, it's quite difficult to use a drug without possessing it, which is what they do. I mean, but technically, if you were to receive a blowback from a joint to somebody, that person is supplying a drug, but you are not doing anything wrong at all. Nothing. You haven't broken the law. But I'm not here to give you little silly get-outs and things like that. This talk is much more generic, and really, the whole act has been administered is completely wrong. So, yesterday, I was told in several lectures that we're really struggling with the international drug conventions that started with a single convention, Narcotic Drug 61. And somehow, all our hands are tied. Now, I do want everyone to understand that whilst the international treaties and conventions on narcotics are binding upon the executive arm of government by their own choice, it does not bind the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. It does not bind Parliament. They do not bind any institution other than the executive, certainly not the courts. So when a court comes out and says, well, I'm sorry that you feel that your client shouldn't go to prison for 20 years for exploring his mind, that's what happened to Casey, but let's look, just remember that those conventions, when the court says that we're bound by those conventions, that is a myth. Okay, so what does the law set out to do? It sets out to curb antisocial behaviour, and it does not exclude any antisocial behaviour that's been caused by drug misuse. So when they tell you that the fact that hundreds of thousands of people and millions of people over the years have died from smoking, or that all the trouble on the streets and the problems of domestic violence associated with alcohol and liver and other bodily harms are all to do with legal drugs that are outside of the jurisdiction of the Government's Act, that is a lie. They drew an artificial divide. And is it an artificial divide between legal and illegal drugs? No. It's an artificial divide between those people who sell alcohol and use alcohol and tobacco and those people that choose other drugs. It's an artificial divide between people. Now, the main point about looking at the Act is to recognise that it is in fact the very law that we want. It's already here. All this, let's scrap the Act and throw it away and start again, is to let the government off the hook for misusing it. The distinction, what we all want, because I think we all accept the fact that if you behave in an ridiculous way that causes other people problems when you're using drugs, that is something that we would accept some sensible intervention about. Yet, that doesn't happen. But it is possible, by using the law that we have, bearing in mind that it doesn't forbid you to use any drug except opium, is that you can use the law through its regulatory apparatus. And I'm going to just say, oh yeah, don't need a new law. So, don't try to take all that in now. I've just given you the sections of the Act which do. And I think when you just look at here, this, for example, 31A, the government can make different provision in relation to different controlled drugs for different classes of persons, using different provisions of this Act or different cases or circumstances. What could be more flexible than that? Oh, going the wrong way. Right, this slide is about the contents of the judge's mind, having read my submission. So, there's a lot of talk. Release and Transform appearing at the Home Affairs Select Committee. Transform say they want to legalise all drugs, and Release want to decriminalise all drugs. Well, I'm sure those drugs will be delighted to hear that. No, it's the wrong concept. I just wrote this off the top of my head to say what I was thinking at the time. We regulate the person with respect to the drug, not the other way around. We're looking, as I said before, for a people policy for drugs, not a drug policy for people. By the way, there's no fourth wall here. I know it appears there are. If you've got something to say, it might even help if you put your hand up if you've been using a deodorant, or shout out if you haven't. So, yes, person regulation means establishing a threshold of interference. That's the key word, the threshold. That's what I was talking about before when I said that there's no differentiation between use and misuse. And why? Because there is no threshold. If you have anything to do with any so-called illegal drugs, then you are illegal before you wake up in the morning. So I just wrote this, just let you read it. I mean, just to make set the theme for the rest of it. It's about respecting peaceful, free thought enabled through personal molecular management. And that's a bit of a euphemism, but sounded right at the time. The benefit is the free consciousness to benefit the individual and the collective. The mirror image of regulating objects, which is what we're enduring at the moment, in essence depicts us as the illegal drugs. We are taking the place in law of the object, not the subject. We are the legal subject, the drug is the object. Does anyone not understand what I mean by that? Because it is quite difficult to understand. Yeah. Well, you know, if you've got an object, let's say these are a packet of dangerous drugs, and you're a police officer, policewoman. If you were to see me with these, and you were to arrest me with them, and tell me, well, I've got you now because you've got some illegal drugs, so take them off me. Now I'm going to make a citizen's arrest on you because you've got illegal drugs. Well, what excuse have you got? Oh, they're not illegal anymore. How does a thing become illegal here and then become illegal? It can't.
Because wouldn't they have the rights to hold illegal drugs, though, isn't
it's not that the drugs could be illegal, whereas you could not have the right to hold an illegal drug. It's that the drug was never illegal. Right. It was me who was acting illegally, by holding it. And you're not. But it was always me, it was never that. I don't know, does that help? Sure. Sorry.
The same concept with firearms.
Exactly the same concept with firearms. Guns are not illegal. The carrying of a weapon without a Home Office license or personal protection certificate is an offence. So, this expression, war, I have to do this, war on drugs. Who likes that expression? Does anybody like it? Because it's all over the place here.
It's war, isn't it? It's the word war.
Well, drugs, it's just, you know, something enters into the popular conception, it's hard to get it out, but, you know, it never was a war on drugs because, I mean, I was saying before, you know, it's not including alcohol, tobacco, pharmaceuticals and everything, so it must be a war on some drugs. Does anybody prefer that?
Yeah. War on the ones that I prefer.
War on?
The ones that I prefer.
Yeah, it's the war on the good ones, yeah?
Yeah, war on the good ones.
What about, it's not really about drugs, I told you that at the beginning. Is it a war on some people who use some drugs? I mean, a lot of people like that. I think that's a lot better. We're getting there. Well, it's not just about people who use drugs. It's about every single person's possibility. It's about your possibility of being sometime in the future. Just your right to ever have a choice. And I'd like that choice now. I don't want to be thinking, you know what, if I was a veteran and I go and kill some people in Afghanistan, in 10 years' time I get an ecstasy tablet? Who's satisfied with some of those things? Who thinks that's going to set a campaign going? What happened to connecting to human rights and our liberties? Something that unites us all. Sorry?
You actually fought for it.
Yeah, well, if you're fighting for the government, then you win some rights. It's just that right. We don't have to earn our rights. in any other way than by being born. Yes?
Isn't this standing under the common law where the principle is if there isn't an injured party, then there shouldn't be a trial?
No victim, no crime. Well, I would still give the government powers to do things as long as they do them fairly. You know, they've got an interest in taking money by regulatory structures, you know, so they can take tax and everything, and there's no victim as such. You know, they do have powers, but they must exercise them fairly and equally. But they don't, because they deliberately mislead us. Now, I've made the people, if you could, you're not meant to hardly be able to see it, because those people, us, we're invisible in the eyes of the law. We are invisible because we're not humans. We are objects. It's like slavery, where they denied all human agency, because the whole law, which was supposed to judge what you're doing, like when you're driving your car, you're driving well, you're driving badly. It's not that the car is illegal or driving is illegal, it's what you're doing. They replaced that whole concept with an indivisibly imaginary illicit object. So that object, if it's anywhere in your vicinity, makes you a criminal. I don't know how it does that, but it's some trick. Really, I think the key word is about censorship. I think David Nutt's talked a lot. I missed his talk actually this time, but I've heard him talk recently in the media about the censorship of science. And I appreciate that. I mean, that's absolutely right. But what else is being censored? What is it that's being censored? Well, censorship is normally about curbing some freedom about what you can say or what you can read, supposedly in the public interest. So maybe we all accept there's a need for some censorship, maybe not. Maybe some people think we shouldn't have the instructions how to make a nuclear bomb or something available. It's best censored. But this is something very, very different. Just about David Nutt's thing, the whole paradox of consequences of censoring science that could actually reveal the truth is such a paradox, isn't it? I mean, it really does cut any kind of progress, really, it strangles it at birth. Really what's happening is what they're censoring are molecules, drug molecules, your molecules, and how they interact. You are nothing more than an equation, effectively, a chemical equation of which the lines of how you can exist are drawn in molecules. And then on the other side of that line are these other molecules that can never form part of you, not lawfully. Isn't that a strange censorship? You are defined by this law, even if you never used a drug in your life. So it's conscious control, limitation. It reduces your possibilities of thought. Not that you're going to necessarily have any, but just the possibility that maybe one day you'd like to. Experience of being is being defined within specific dimensional coordinates. Defined connectors to a notion of consciousness defined by all the wrong questions. Maybe very conservative religious ideas. Both legal and philosophical thinking, making all liberty an illusion. Because without freedom of thought, nothing else matters. You really could be in the matrix without any clue what's going on. And just to remind you, speaking back to law, Article 9, the ECHR, the European Convention, freedom of thought, conscience and religion. And it's the thought that matters, not so much the rest of it. People are arguing for religious rights, but really, how do you ever come to form a religious view? Well, it must start with a thought. I think that's what happens. I think maybe even with the Santo Daime in Brazil, the church use ayahuasca. People don't go along there for the first time thinking, well, this is my religion. They experience the context and the DMT in that collective arena, and all of a sudden they see some light and decide to join the religion. So really, it's the freedom of thought that matters. Going wrong direction again. So how they fooled us. Back to the mirrors again. Just to sum up, I think we all, well, there's a few more slides if I've got time, but in everyday language we use this thing, I won't get too technical, called a transferred epithet. And this is what they've done in the war on drugs because what they've done is rely on the fact that you understand what they mean when they reverse the subject and object. So the example I keep using is disabled toilet. It is not a toilet that needs a plumber to fix it, is it? But we understand what it means, so why be pedantic and start complaining? They use the expression legal and illegal drugs. Well, they're reversing the subject and object, and we all know what they mean, so we accept it. But when you do that in a legal context, it means that you've lost everything. Do you not see that you've been replaced by an object? And it creates the artificial divide. The legal and illegal drugs part, that lets them say, well, all those people doing all those terrible things, they're using legal drugs, they're nothing to do with us. But in fact, the law doesn't recognise any such thing. Just a very quick thought about what they said last week about drug driving. I think I'm really concerned actually that the future is going to be very dystopian at the moment, and that we haven't turned the corner, even if medical cannabis users can get Sativex and the rest of it. And they want to make it easier to prosecute people with a drug in the body, which can be zero limit. So it removes the difficulty of proving a driver was impaired by drugs. Isn't that what the whole point was to actually stop people being, get people who were impaired by drugs, as opposed to those who are not? How absurd is that? And of course, that's because they believe in illegal drugs, and therefore it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they're just doing the right thing. They're suppose in their minds. Whoops, going wrong way again. Let's just get rid of those horrible proposals. So, this war on people. Yes, we're all aware of the paradox of consequences of that, and that's what most people talk about. If only we could get clean drugs, there'd be less harm. The key point's about the censorship, new possibilities. For every person's experience of I is the same. What I'm talking about is our consciousness, how we relate to it as individuals. That's all there is. There's nothing else, but it's the same for everyone. And it's about a capacity for experience. It's about where you can go. It's almost like the moment you haven't got a passport to go anywhere. So, more than that, it's more than a war on people. It's a war on humanity. So it's the current debate in the so-called drug legalization movement is false consciousness. It's all within the existing paradigm. It's a war on humanity. It's actually, when you think about it, because the only thing that we have is ourselves and our consciousness, and that's what we call God, that we can't even see it because we're not allowed to. Thank you very much.